Professor Zithera's mandibles clicked as she activated the holographic display in the center of the lecture hall. The insectoid instructor stood nearly 2 meters tall, her chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights of the Galactic Academy. Around her, 60 students from 20 different species sat in curved rows, their attention fixed on the floating images that began to materialize above the platform. The first creature appeared in stunning three-dimensional detail. It was a serpentoid easily 3 meters long, with scales that shifted between deep purple and black. Its head was triangular, and when the hologram showed its mouth opening, rows of crystalline fangs became visible. A glowing venom dripped from each tooth, leaving trails of bioluminescent liquid in the air. The Kashari Viper, Professor Zithera announced, her translator converting her clicking speech into standard galactic language. Native to the swamp regions of Kashar Prime. This creature is classified as a Class 3 hazard. Its venom causes complete neural paralysis within 3 to 5 minutes. There is no known antidote that works universally across species. The creature is highly territorial and will attack anything it perceives as a threat to its hunting grounds. A student in the front row, a gelatinous being from the Hydro system, rippled with visible distress. Next to him, a crystalline life form's internal light dimmed to nearly nothing. 10 sat 2 rows behind them, his feathered body tense. The avian student came from Area, a peaceful garden world where the most dangerous predator was roughly the size of his closed fist. His species had evolved in an environment so safe that their primary defense mechanism was simply flying away. He chirped softly, a sound his translator did not bother converting because it was pure anxiety. Ryan Cooper sat near the back of the lecture hall, his posture relaxed. The human had been the subject of curious stares since he enrolled in advanced survival studies at the beginning of the semester. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, and their homeworld had a reputation. Earth was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, a rating that made most species uncomfortable. But Ryan seemed pleasant enough, quiet, and he always paid attention during lectures. The hologram shifted to show the next threat. 4 lean, reptilian creatures moved across the projection in perfect coordination. They had powerful legs built for running, claws designed for gripping prey, and eyes that tracked movement with predatory intelligence. Therax pack hunters, Professor Zithera continued. Also Class 3 hazards. These creatures hunt in coordinated groups. They can pursue prey for days without stopping. Their stamina is exceptional, and they communicate through subsonic frequencies to coordinate their attacks. Once they have selected a target, they rarely give up the chase. More students shifted uncomfortably. Zora, a reptilian student from the Saurian Collective, maintained her confident posture. Her species had evolved from predators themselves, though millions of years of civilization had softened those instincts considerably. Still, she prided herself on being tougher than most of her classmates. The holograms continued. A swarm of insect-like creatures appeared next, thousands of them moving in a dark cloud. Professor Zithera explained they were parasitic, capable of consuming flesh at an alarming rate. Then came the megafauna, a massive 6-legged herbivore that stood nearly 4 meters tall at the shoulder. Despite being a plant eater, it was incredibly aggressive and attacked anything that entered its territory. The professor displayed images of toxic plant life that released dangerous spores, water sources contaminated with bacteria that could sicken most galactic species, and environmental data showing temperature ranges that would swing from dangerously hot during the day to freezing at night. "This is your final examination," Professor Zithera announced. "You will spend 48 hours in a controlled habitat dome that contains all of these organisms. They will behave naturally. The environment will be authentic. This is not a simulation. This is real." 3 students in the front row stood up immediately. They did not say anything. They simply gathered their belongings and walked toward the exit. The door slid open with a soft hiss and closed behind them. Professor Zithera paused her presentation but showed no emotion. "This happened every semester. Medical teams will monitor your vital signs continuously," the professor continued. "However, extraction is only authorized in cases of imminent death. Injuries, discomfort, fear, these are not grounds for removal. You must complete the full 48 hours. This certification is required for any career in planetary exploration, xenobiology field research, or emergency response operations." 10 leaned slightly toward Ryan without taking his eyes off the hologram. "This is completely insane," he whispered, his translator keeping his voice low. "My species has no natural defenses. Our hollow bones make us fragile. If one of those pack hunters catches me, I am finished." Ryan nodded but did not look away from the display. He was studying the creatures carefully, watching how they moved, noting their behaviors. You will be permitted to bring one piece of standard survival equipment, Professor Zithera said. A new hologram appeared showing various devices. Energy shields, medical kits with broad-spectrum treatments, distress beacons, thermal regulation suits, water purification units, portable shelters, or any other approved single item. Students immediately began discussing their options. Voices filled the lecture hall. Zora announced loudly that she would take a personal energy shield, confident it would protect her from most threats. Ten said he was considering a medical kit with antitoxins and healing compounds. Other students debated between thermal suits and water purifiers. Professor Zithera's compound eyes swiveled toward the back of the room. Human Cooper, she said, her voice cutting through the chatter. Have you selected your equipment? The lecture hall fell silent. All eyes turned to Ryan. He stood up slowly, his movements casual. Yes, Professor. I would like a knife, please. Fixed blade, about 15 centimeters long. Carbon steel if possible. The silence deepened. Students stared at him with expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. Zora's scales shifted to a pattern that indicated amusement among her people. A knife? Professor Zithera repeated. Her mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of confusion in her species. Human Cooper, you understand that this examination involves actual dangerous organisms. These are not holographic simulations. The creatures can cause real harm. You may bring an energy shield, a medical kit, any advanced survival technology. And you choose a simple blade. Ryan sat back down. Yes, Professor. Just a knife. Ten turned fully in his seat to stare at Ryan. Have you lost your mind? He chirped. A knife will not stop a pack of Therax hunters. It will not protect you from venom or parasites or freezing temperatures. Zora laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. The human is either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. My guess is stupid. Your species has no natural armor, no venom, no claws or fangs worth mentioning. You are soft and weak. You will not last 6 hours in that habitat, let alone 48. Other students murmured in agreement. A few looked at Ryan with what might have been pity. Ryan did not respond to the comments. He simply pulled out his data pad and began reviewing the information about the habitat environment that Professor Zithera had uploaded to the class network. Professor Zithera's mandibles continued clicking as she studied the human. In her 8 years teaching this course, she had never had a student request such minimal equipment. Most species relied heavily on technology to compensate for their biological limitations. Humans were famous for being adaptable, but this seemed like overconfidence bordering on suicidal. Very well, the professor finally said. Your choice is registered. All students have 3 days to prepare. The examination begins at dawn on the 4th day. Dismissed. Students filed out of the lecture hall, still talking about the human who had chosen a knife to face class 3 hazards. Zora made sure to pass close to Ryan on her way out. I will request your emergency extraction footage for my collection, she said with a smirk. It should be entertaining. Ryan looked up at her and smiled politely. Good luck on the exam, Zora. She snorted and walked away, her tail swishing behind her. Ten approached more carefully. Ryan, he said quietly, I do not understand your decision. Please tell me you have some plan that I am not seeing. Ryan closed his data pad and stood up, slinging his bag over his shoulder. I have everything I need, Tennessee. Do not worry. But a knife is a very useful tool, Ryan finished. He patted the avian student gently on the shoulder, careful not to damage the delicate feathers. See you in 3 days. He walked out of the lecture hall, leaving Ten standing alone, more confused and worried than ever. The transport shuttle deposited all 27 remaining students at different points around the habitat dome's perimeter. Ryan felt the warm artificial sun on his face as the shuttle lifted off, leaving him standing alone at the edge of a dense forest. The dome stretched for kilometers in every direction, a carefully controlled ecosystem that mimicked a real planetary environment. He checked the simple knife on his belt, the only equipment he had brought. Around his wrist was a monitoring band that tracked his vital signs and location. Every student wore one. The professors would be watching from the safety of the control center. Ryan took a deep breath and looked around carefully. The first rule of survival was not to panic. The second rule was to take stock of your situation. He could hear water running somewhere to his left, which meant a stream or river. That was good. Water was essential. He could also see several types of plants that looked promising, though he would need to test them carefully before eating anything. Through his monitoring band, he could hear other students talking frantically on the open communication channel. Zora was already activating her energy shield. Ten was checking his medical kit nervously. Another student was complaining about the heat. Someone else was asking if they could form groups for safety. Ryan muted the channel. Too much talking would just create anxiety. He needed to focus. He walked toward the sound of water, moving carefully and watching where he stepped. The ground was covered with fallen leaves and small branches. Perfect. He began collecting the driest pieces of wood he could find, tucking them under his arm. When he reached the stream, he knelt down and examined the water. It was clear and moving fast over rocks. Good signs, but still not safe to drink without treatment. He found a good spot about 30 meters from the water, on slightly higher ground near a cluster of large trees. The location gave him visibility in multiple directions while the trees would provide some shelter from wind. Ryan cleared a small area of leaves and dug a shallow pit with his knife and hands. Then he arranged stones in a circle around the pit. The sun was still high, but he knew from the briefing that temperature would drop rapidly after dark. He needed fire, and he needed it before his hands got too cold to work effectively. Ryan gathered more wood, organizing it by size. Tinder, kindling, and fuel wood. He found a dry branch and cut it into a flat board using his knife. Then he cut a straight stick and shaped one end into a point. Using the tip of his knife, he carved a small notch in the board. He knelt down and placed the pointed stick into the notch on the board. Holding the stick between his palms, he began moving his hands back and forth rapidly, spinning the stick against the board. The friction created heat. He kept the pressure steady and the speed consistent. His hands moved down the stick as he worked, so he had to reposition them at the top and continue. Again and again. Smoke began to rise from the notch. Ryan increased his speed slightly, keeping the motion smooth. A tiny ember formed in the notch, glowing red. He carefully lifted the board and tapped the ember onto a prepared nest of dry grass and shredded bark. Cupping his hands around it, he blew gently. The ember glowed brighter. He blew again and suddenly a small flame appeared. Ryan quickly added the finest tinder, then slightly larger pieces, building the fire gradually. Within minutes, he had a proper fire burning in his stone circle. He sat back and allowed himself a small smile. Fire meant warmth, protection, a way to purify water, and a psychological boost that was worth more than people realized. The sun began to set, and the temperature dropped exactly as predicted. Ryan added larger pieces of wood to his fire and used his knife to cut evergreen branches. He arranged them into a simple lean-to shelter against a fallen log, creating a reflective wall that would bounce the fire's heat back toward his sleeping spot. Through the forest he could see lights from other camps. Most students had activated some kind of powered shelter or heating unit. They glowed like small beacons in the growing darkness. Ryan's monitoring band vibrated. He glanced at it and saw an alert. Large predators were active in the area. The Therax pack hunters were moving. He fed more wood to his fire, building it higher. Fire was one of the oldest forms of protection humans had, and it still worked. An hour after full dark, Ryan heard movement in the forest. It was not the random sounds of small creatures. This was deliberate, multiple sources circling. The pack hunters had found him. 4 pairs of eyes reflected the firelight from the darkness beyond his camp. The Therax were exactly as described, lean and reptilian with powerful legs and sharp claws. They moved with coordination, spreading out to surround him. Pack tactics. They were testing him, looking for weakness, deciding if he was prey. Ryan stood up slowly. He picked up several fist-sized rocks he had collected earlier and held them ready. Then he took a deep breath and yelled. It was not a scream of fear but a loud, aggressive shout. He threw the first rock hard, aiming for the nearest pair of eyes. It struck the ground near the creature and the hunter jumped back. Ryan threw another rock and shouted again, louder this time. He grabbed a burning branch from his fire and waved it in a wide arc. The flames left trails in the darkness. He stepped forward aggressively, making himself larger, making noise, showing that he was not easy prey. The Therax hunters hesitated. This was not normal prey behavior. Most creatures ran or cowered. This one was advancing. It had fire. It was making threatening sounds. The pack communicated through subsonic frequencies humans could not hear, but Ryan could see their body language changing. Uncertainty. Confusion. He threw another rock, this one striking one of the hunters on its flank. The creature yelped and jumped sideways. Ryan shouted again and took another step forward, waving the burning branch. The pack hunters retreated into the darkness. Ryan could hear them moving away, their footsteps fading into the forest. They would find easier prey. something that ran, something that acted like food. Ryan waited several minutes, listening carefully. When he was satisfied they had truly gone, he returned to his fire and sat down. His heart was beating faster than normal, but not much. Adrenaline was useful, but panic was not. He added more wood to the fire and checked his shelter. In the control center, Professor Zithera stared at her monitoring screens in complete disbelief. She rewound the footage and watched it again. The human had created fire without any tools except a knife. He had built a shelter from natural materials. And when confronted by pack hunters that should have terrified him, his vital signs had barely changed. She pulled up Ryan's medical data. His heart rate during the encounter with the Therax had reached 90 beats per minute. For a human, that was only slightly elevated. His stress hormones showed mild increase but nothing approaching panic. In fact, his current readings were lower than they had been during the classroom briefing 3 days ago. This makes no biological sense, Professor Zithera said to herself. Her mandibles clicked rapidly. He should be terrified. She compared his data to other students. Ten's heart rate had spiked to dangerous levels just from hearing sounds in the forest. Zora's stress hormones were 3 times her baseline despite being protected by an energy shield. Another student had already burned through half their emergency medical supplies treating anxiety-induced nausea. Professor Zithera opened a communication channel to Chancellor Voss. Sir, you need to see this. The human student. His stress levels are lower than his baseline. He encountered Class 3 predators and his response was to chase them away by throwing rocks and shouting. There was a pause on the other end. Did the predators attack? No, sir. They retreated. The humans showed aggressive behavior and they chose to leave rather than engage. Another pause, longer this time. Continue monitoring. I want detailed analysis of all his actions. Professor Zithera returned her attention to the screens. Ryan had laid down in his shelter now, his back to the fire, using his jacket as a pillow. His breathing was slow and regular. The monitoring band indicated he was falling asleep. She looked at other screens. Students were huddled in their high-tech shelters, communicators active, talking nervously to each other about every sound they heard. Some had not even attempted to sleep yet. But the human, with nothing but a knife and fire he had made with his own hands, was sleeping peacefully in the middle of a habitat filled with Class 3 hazards. Professor Zithera's mandibles clicked softly. Perhaps there was more to Deathworld species than she had understood. Perhaps surviving on a planet like Earth required a completely different psychological framework. What seemed dangerous to species from safe worlds might be just another evening to a human. She made a note in her file. This examination was revealing something important, something that academic theories about death worlds had failed to capture. Humans did not just survive hostile environments through physical adaptations. They survived because they had fundamentally different threat assessment protocols. What terrified other species was simply normal to them. Morning light filtered through the dome's transparent ceiling, and Ryan woke to the sound of birds calling from the canopy above. He stretched carefully and checked his fire. The coals were still warm, and he added small twigs to bring the flames back to life. The temperature had dropped to near freezing during the night, but his shelter and fire had kept him comfortable enough. He needed water. His body required regular hydration, and while he could survive for days without food, water was essential. Ryan took his knife and walked down to the stream, moving quietly and watching for any signs of danger. The forest was waking up around him, and that was a good sign. When prey animals were active and making noise, it usually meant predators were not nearby. As he approached the water, Ryan stopped suddenly. On the opposite bank, coiled on a flat rock in the early sunlight, was the Kashari viper. The serpentoid was even larger in person than the hologram had shown, nearly 4 meters of scaled muscle. Its crystalline fangs were visible even from this distance, and the venom glands on either side of its head pulsed with that eerie bioluminescent glow. Ryan stood completely still. The viper's head turned slightly in his direction, its tongue flicking out to taste the air. He did not move. He barely breathed. The snake was not actively hunting. It was warming itself in the sun after a cold night, a behavior common to reptilian species on Earth. After a long moment, the viper seemed to lose interest. It coiled more tightly on its rock and closed its eyes to slits, still aware but not concerned. Ryan carefully backed away, moving upstream about 50 meters before approaching the water again. The viper had established that rock as its territory. Fine. The stream was long and there was plenty of water elsewhere. He knelt at the new spot and drank carefully, using his hands to cup the water. It was cold and tasted clean, but he knew it still carried risks. Later he would boil some for complete safety, but for now, fast-moving stream water from a good source was acceptable. Ryan heard shouting through his monitoring band. He had muted it last night, but the sound was loud enough to break through. He activated the channel and immediately heard chaos. Multiple voices talking at once, panic clear in every tone. "They are everywhere," someone screamed. "The swarm, it is attacking. My shield is failing." That was Zora's voice. "The power cell cannot handle this many impacts." Ryan looked in the direction of the voices. Through the trees about 200 meters away, he could see the glowing lights of the student encampment. A dark cloud moved around them, thousands of small shapes. The parasitic insects. They must have been drawn by the lights or the heat signatures from the powered equipment. He ran back to his camp and grabbed the greenest branches he could find near his fire. He also collected damp leaves and moss from the shaded areas near the stream. Then he ran toward the other students, his knife in one hand and the materials in the other. When he arrived, he saw 7 students clustered together, their energy shields flickering as thousands of insects battered against them. The creatures were each about the size of a human thumb, with sharp mandibles and wings that buzzed with an angry sound. 10 was in the center of the group, his feathers pressed flat against his body in terror. Zora stood at the edge, her shield projector sparking dangerously. Ryan did not hesitate. He threw his damp leaves and green branches directly into the nearest powered heating unit. The wet material landed on the hot surface and immediately began to produce thick, white smoke. Lots of it. The smoke billowed up and spread through the area, carried by the morning breeze. "What are you doing?" Zora shouted. "You will suffocate us." "Just hold your breath when the smoke is thick," Ryan called back. "It will not hurt you, but it will drive the insects away." The parasitic swarm encountered the smoke and their behavior changed immediately. The organized attack pattern broke apart. Individual insects began flying erratically, trying to escape the smoke. Within seconds, the cloud of attackers dispersed, the insects fleeing in all directions away from the choking smoke. Ryan grabbed more damp material and added it to other heating units around the camp, creating a perimeter of smoke. The insects would not return while that barrier existed. 10 emerged from the shield cluster, coughing slightly but unharmed. "How did you know that would work?" he asked, his voice shaking. Ryan shrugged. "Mosquitoes on Earth hate smoke. We use it all the time to keep them away from camps. These things are bigger, but the principle is the same. Most insects avoid smoke because it signals fire, and fire is dangerous." Zora deactivated her failing energy shield and stared at Ryan. Her scales had shifted to a color pattern he had not seen before. If he had to guess, it indicated grudging respect. "You saved us," she said simply. "My shield had maybe 30 seconds of power remaining." "We need to move your camp away from here," Ryan said, looking around at their setup. "You have too much artificial light and heat. It attracts creatures. Find a spot with natural shelter and use passive temperature regulation instead of powered systems." Over the next several hours, Ryan helped the students relocate to a better position. He showed them how to identify safe water sources and explained which plants in the area were likely edible for their various biologies. Most species had brought ration packs, but several students were already running low because stress made them eat more frequently. Ryan walked back to the stream, this time going downstream away from the viper's territory. He spent an hour using his knife to craft a simple spear. He found a straight branch about 2 meters long and carefully carved one end into a sharp point. Then he hardened the point by holding it briefly over his fire, burning away the softer outer layer to expose the denser wood beneath. At the stream, he waded into the shallow water and stood very still. Small fish moved in the current, heading upstream. Ryan waited patiently, the spear held ready. When a fish about 30 centimeters long passed near him, he struck quickly. The spear pierced the water and caught the fish through its body. He returned to his camp with 3 fish. Using his knife, he cleaned them carefully, removing the inedible parts and burying them away from his sleeping area. Then he constructed a simple smoking rack from green sticks and placed the fish over his fire to cook slowly. 10 appeared at the edge of Ryan's camp, watching with fascination. "You caught those with a stick?" the avian student asked. "With a spear," Ryan corrected gently. "Come sit. The fish will be ready soon." "I cannot eat Earth-origin proteins," 10 said sadly. "My biology is not compatible." "I know," Ryan said. "But I can show you the technique. Look." He gestured to the stream. "Fish gather where the current flows around rocks because insects collect there. You stand still until the fish forget you are there. Then you strike fast, aiming slightly below where you see the fish because water bends light. Ten settled onto the ground, tucking his legs beneath his body. On my world, food comes from stores or from farms. We have not hunted for thousands of generations. That is fine, Ryan said, turning the fish on his rack. But knowing how to get food from nature is useful. What if you crash on an uninhabited planet someday? What if your supplies run out? Other students began arriving at Ryan's camp in small groups. Word had spread about the smoke trick with the insects, about the fish, about the human who seemed completely comfortable in an environment that terrified everyone else. They sat at a respectful distance and watched as Ryan worked. He showed them how to test plants for edibility using small amounts and waiting for reactions. He explained that shelters should be built with entrances facing away from prevailing winds. He demonstrated how to create cordage by twisting plant fibers together, making rope from grass and bark. Zora arrived last, moving with careful dignity. She sat near Ten and watched in silence as Ryan explained how to read animal tracks in the soft ground near the stream. "Why are you teaching us these things?" she asked finally. "We are competitors. We all need to pass this examination." Ryan looked up from the tracks he had been pointing out. "We are all going to pass," he said calmly. "This is not about competition. This is about showing you can survive. Helping each other increases everyone's chances." In the control center, Chancellor Voss stood behind Professor Zithera, watching the monitors intently. Multiple screens showed Ryan's camp, where nearly 15 students had now gathered. The human was demonstrating how to create a water filter using sand, charcoal, and grass layered in a container made from folded bark. "Remarkable," Chancellor Voss said quietly. "The Deathworlder is not just surviving. He is thriving. And he is teaching the others." Professor Zithera's mandibles clicked in a pattern that indicated deep thought. "Sir, I have been analyzing his behavior patterns. He treats every challenge as routine. The viper that could kill him with one bite? He simply avoids its territory. The pack hunters? He drives them away. The parasitic swarm? He solves the problem in seconds with smoke. Nothing in this habitat frightens him. Because nothing here is worse than his homeworld," Chancellor Voss said, understanding dawning in his voice. "Earth is rated Class 12. This habitat is designed to challenge species from Class 4 through Class 8 worlds. To him, this is probably easier than a camping trip on his own planet." Professor Zithera pulled up comparative data. "Sir, according to Earth's ecological records, humans evolved alongside predators that would be rated Class 5 or Class 6 hazards individually. Large cats that hunt cooperatively. Reptilian ambush predators in water. Massive herbivores more aggressive than our megafauna. Venomous creatures of hundreds of species. Parasitic insects carrying deadly diseases. And humans not only survived, they became the dominant species." Chancellor Voss watched as Ryan showed a student how to identify north using the position of shadows. "We have been training galactic species for survival using scenarios we consider dangerous," he said slowly. "But we never adjusted our curriculum for Deathworld species. To them, our dangerous is their normal." On the screen, Ryan was sharing his cooked fish with a student whose rations had run out. The student's biology was compatible enough with Earth proteins to make it safe. The student ate carefully at first, then with more enthusiasm. "He is turning this examination into a teaching opportunity," Professor Zithera observed. "The other students are learning more practical survival skills in 6 hours with him than they learned in an entire semester of classroom instruction." Chancellor Voss nodded slowly. "Continue monitoring. I want complete documentation of everything he does. This may change how we approach survival training for all students." The second day in the Habitat Dome was progressing smoothly until the alarm sounded through every student's monitoring band. Ryan was showing Ten how to tie a secure knot when the alert vibrated against his wrist. He tapped the device and read the warning message displayed on the small screen. "Critical alert. Territorial megafauna approaching student zones. All students prepare for emergency extraction protocols." Through the forest, Ryan could hear Professor Zithera's voice broadcasting on the emergency channel. "Attention all students. The habitat megafauna is moving toward the eastern sector. This creature weighs approximately 4 tons and is extremely aggressive when its territory is challenged. Move to designated extraction zones immediately. This is not optional." Students began panicking instantly. Ryan could hear them through the communication channel, their voices overlapping in fear. Equipment was being abandoned as they ran. Energy shields were activated at maximum power. Someone was crying. Ryan stood up and looked toward the eastern sector. That was where most of the students had relocated their camps after he helped them move away from the insect swarm. He could hear something large moving through the forest, breaking branches and pushing through undergrowth. The sound was getting closer. "10, stay here," Ryan said calmly. "Do not run. Just stay by my fire." "But the extraction zones," 10 chirped frantically, his feathers standing up in alarm. "We do not need extraction," Ryan said. He started walking toward the sounds of the approaching creature, not away from it. Through the trees he caught his first glimpse of the megafauna. It was massive, easily matching the hologram scale. The creature stood on 6 powerful legs, each one thick as a tree trunk. Its body was covered in armored plates that overlapped like natural shields. The head was broad with a shortened snout, and 2 curved horns protruded from above its eyes. It looked similar to a rhinoceros from Earth, but larger and with extra legs for stability. The creature was not hunting. Ryan could see that immediately from its behavior. It was walking in a straight line, its head down, occasionally stopping to tear vegetation from the ground with its powerful jaws. This was feeding behavior, not aggression. The megafauna was simply following its regular path to its feeding grounds. Ryan looked at where the students had placed their camps. They had chosen a clearing with good visibility and access to water. It was a logical choice from a human perspective. But they had not considered that the clearing was good precisely because large herbivores kept it clear by feeding there regularly. The camps were directly in the creature's path to its food source. Ryan ran back to where the students were gathering near their extraction beacons. Zora was there, her energy shield already activated. Several other students were ready to signal for emergency extraction. "Stop," Ryan called out. "Do not activate the extraction. We do not need it." "Are you insane?" Zora hissed. "That thing will crush us." "Only if we stay in its way," Ryan said. He pointed to the clearing where their camps were set up. "That clearing exists because the megafauna feeds there. We put our camps in its dining room. We need to move our camps, not run away from the creature." Professor Zithera's voice came through the communication channel. "Human Cooper, extraction protocols are mandatory when megafauna approach. The creature is highly aggressive." "With respect, Professor, it is not aggressive right now," Ryan said, watching the creature through the trees. "It is hungry. It wants to eat plants, not us. If we move away from its feeding territory, it will ignore us completely." "This creature has injured students in past exercises," Professor Zithera insisted. "Because they probably got between it and its food," Ryan replied. "Or they ran and it saw them as threats." "Professor, trust me. I have dealt with territorial herbivores before." There was a long pause. Then Chancellor Voss's voice came through instead. "Explain quickly, Human Cooper." Ryan kept his eyes on the approaching megafauna. "On Earth we have animals called elephants. They weigh 6 tons, have tusks, and will charge anything they see as a threat. We also have hippos which kill more people than lions do. They are herbivores but extremely dangerous when protecting territory. I have seen both species in nature. This creature is behaving exactly the same way. It has a path it follows, a territory it protects, and food sources it needs. We are in its space. We need to leave its space." "And if you are wrong?" Chancellor Voss asked. "Then you can extract us," Ryan said. "But give me 5 minutes first." Another pause. "Proceed. But extraction teams are standing by." Ryan turned to the other students. "Everyone grab only essential items. Leave the heavy equipment. We are moving camps to the northern sector, away from this clearing." "I am not taking orders from you," Zora said, but her scales showed uncertainty. "Then stay here and get stepped on," Ryan said simply. "Your choice." He started gathering the nearest students' belongings and moving them quickly away from the clearing. 10 helped immediately, carrying what his small frame could manage. After a moment of hesitation, Zora deactivated her shield and began helping too. Other students followed. The megafauna emerged into the clearing just as the last student moved their camp. The creature paused, its massive head swinging left and right. It looked directly at the group of students who stood about 50 meters away outside the clearing. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then the megafauna lowered its head and began eating the thick grass and low plants in the clearing. It moved through the area systematically, completely ignoring the students who watched from a safe distance. The creature was not angry. It was not aggressive. It was simply having lunch. "It is ignoring us," 10 whispered in amazement. "Because we are not threatening it or competing for its food," Ryan said. "Most herbivores are not naturally aggressive. They just defend their resources and their space. Respect that and there is no conflict." The students watched in fascination as the enormous creature fed peacefully. After about 20 minutes, It had eaten its fill and began walking away, following a different path through the forest. Soon, it disappeared from sight, and the crashing sounds of its passage faded. Zora turned to Ryan, her scales showing a color he had not seen before. "You were right," she said quietly. "On my world we have no creatures like that. Our largest animal is maybe 1/10 that size and completely docile. I would have signaled for extraction. I would have failed this examination." "You would have been safe," Ryan said. "Extraction is not failure. It is just a different choice." "But you understood," another student said. "You knew exactly what to do." Ryan helped them set up their new camps in the northern sector, away from the megafauna's territory. As they worked, students began asking him questions about Earth, about the wildlife, about how humans learned to survive. "Tell us about Earth's dangerous animals," Ten asked. "The ones you mentioned. Elephants and hippos." Ryan sat down near a newly built fire, and the students gathered around him in a loose circle. "Earth has many large predators and dangerous herbivores," he began. "Bears are omnivores that can weigh up to 800 kilograms. They have claws as long as human fingers and can run faster than humans despite their size. Lions hunt in packs, coordinating their attacks like the thorax but much larger. Crocodiles hide in water and ambush prey with bite forces strong enough to crush bone." The students listened with expressions of horror and fascination. "Hippos, as I mentioned, are herbivores but kill more humans than any large predator in Africa," Ryan continued. "They are territorial and will attack boats, vehicles, anything they see as a threat. We also have buffalo that travel in herds of thousands and will trample anything in their path. Venomous snakes exist on every continent except Antarctica. Some spiders carry venom that can kill. Even some plants are poisonous to touch." "And humans evolved alongside all of these creatures?" Zora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Ryan said. "For millions of years. Humans were not the strongest or the fastest. We did not have claws or venom or armor. But we learned. We observed patterns. We understood behavior. We created tools. We worked together. Slowly, over countless generations, we went from being prey to being the apex species." Ten's feathers ruffled. "Apex means top, yes? The highest?" "Yes," Ryan confirmed. "Humans are apex predators on Earth. Not because we are the most dangerous individually, but because we are the smartest, the most adaptable, and the most persistent. We learned that you do not have to be the biggest to survive. You just have to be the smartest and the most willing to keep trying." The students sat in silence, processing this information. The concept was alien to most of them. Their species had evolved on worlds with minimal threats, where intelligence developed for social cooperation or art or philosophy, not for survival against constant danger. Zora spoke so quietly that Ryan almost missed it. "We called your species primitive," she said, not looking at him. "In class I said humans were weak, soft. No natural weapons or defenses. I was wrong." "You were not completely wrong," Ryan said gently. "Humans are soft compared to many species. We do not have scales or exoskeletons. We are not the strongest. But you learned to survive among monsters that would terrify our ancestors," Zora continued. "My people evolved on a world with mild weather and abundant food. Our biggest challenge was deciding which fruit to eat. Your people evolved in a nightmare and you thrived. That is not primitive. That is something else entirely. Adaptable, Ten suggested. Resilient. Terrifying, another student added, then quickly said, "I mean that as a compliment." Ryan smiled. "Humans are survivors. That is what Earth taught us. That is what any Class 12 Deathworld teaches its species. Adapt or die. Learn or perish. Respect danger but do not let it control you." The sun was setting now and the temperature began to drop again. Students prepared for the second night, but with more confidence than before. They had learned from Ryan that survival was not about having the best equipment. It was about understanding the environment, respecting the creatures within it, and making smart decisions based on observation. In the control center, Chancellor Voss reviewed the day's footage with Professor Zithera. They watched Ryan calmly assess the megafauna, organize the evacuation of camps, and predict the creature's behavior with perfect accuracy. "He turned a potential disaster into a teaching moment," Chancellor Voss said. "0 injuries. 0 extractions. And the students learned more about animal behavior in 10 minutes than our entire curriculum covers." Professor Zithera's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Sir, I believe we need to reconsider how we classify danger. What we consider Class 3 hazards may be routine obstacles for Deathworld species. The human treated that megafauna the way we would treat a mildly annoying bureaucratic procedure. Because on his world he has faced worse, Chancellor Voss said. Much worse apparently. They watched as Ryan sat with the students around a fire, telling stories about Earth. The students listened with rapt attention, their earlier fear replaced by curiosity and respect. We have been teaching survival as if all species face threats the same way, Professor Zathera continued. But Deathworld species have fundamentally different threat responses. They do not panic because panic means death on their worlds. They observe because observation is survival. They adapt because adaptation is required. Chancellor Voss nodded slowly. One more day remains in the examination. But I think we already know the outcome. On the screen, Ryan was demonstrating to 10 how to identify animal tracks in the dirt. The avian student practiced carefully, his earlier terror completely gone, replaced by genuine interest in learning a new skill. The 48-hour examination period ended at dawn on the third day. Transport shuttles arrived at designated extraction points to collect the students and return them to the academy. Ryan dismantled his shelter carefully, scattered the remains of his fire, and packed away his knife. He left the area looking almost exactly as he had found it, a practice called leave no trace that his father had taught him years ago. The shuttle ride back was quiet. Most students were exhausted, their faces showing the strain of 2 days in an environment that had pushed them to their limits. Several had minor injuries, nothing serious but enough to require medical attention. A few stared out the windows with the distant look of people who had experienced something profound. Ryan sat near 10, who had fallen asleep with his head tucked under one wing. Zora sat across from them, her scales displaying a pattern of thoughtful contemplation. She had not spoken much since the incident with the megafauna, but Ryan had noticed her watching him carefully, as if trying to understand something that did not quite make sense to her. At the Academy Medical Center, all students underwent standard health evaluations. Physicians checked for injuries, exposure damage, dehydration, nutritional deficiencies, and psychological trauma. The medical staff moved efficiently through their procedures, documenting everything for the official examination records. When Ryan's turn came, the physician, a tall crystalline being named Dr. Helix, ran the scanner over him multiple times as if the device was malfunctioning. "This cannot be correct," Dr. Helix said, checking the scanner's calibration. "According to these readings, you have gained mass during the examination. 0.7 kilograms to be precise." Ryan shrugged. "I ate well. Fish, some edible plants. The food was good." Dr. Helix made several notes on his data pad, his internal light pulsing in what might have been confusion. "Your hydration levels are optimal. No injuries detected. Stress hormone levels are actually lower than your baseline reading from before the examination. Your cardiovascular system shows signs of light exercise but nothing strenuous. Human Cooper, were you aware you were participating in a survival examination and not a recreational camping trip?" "I was aware, yes," Ryan said with a slight smile. "Remarkable," Dr. Helix muttered, making more notes. "Absolutely remarkable." The evaluation results were compiled over the next several hours. Professor Zathera called a faculty meeting to review the data before assigning final grades. 12 professors sat around a conference table in the Academy's administrative building, holographic displays showing detailed information about each student's performance. "Let us begin with the standard metrics," Professor Zathera said, activating the primary display. "Survival time, resource management, threat avoidance, problem solving, and psychological stability under stress." She cycled through each student's results. Most had performed adequately, staying alive for the full 48 hours and demonstrating basic competence. Several had required minor medical interventions. 2 had come close to activating emergency extraction but ultimately persevered. No one had failed, which was better than some previous years. Then she reached Ryan's file and the room fell silent. "Human Cooper used zero defensive equipment throughout the examination," Professor Zathera said, her mandibles clicking. "His only tool was a basic knife. Despite this, he not only survived but thrived. He gained body mass from foraging. His stress levels remained below baseline. He encountered every major hazard in the habitat and avoided or neutralized each threat without injury or assistance." Professor Venn, who taught xenobiology, leaned forward. "The report says he created fire without modern tools. Is that accurate?" "Completely accurate," Professor Zathera confirmed. "He used friction between wooden implements. This is apparently a common skill on Earth, though considered primitive by most galactic standards. However, the fire provided warmth, protection, water purification, and psychological comfort. It was arguably more effective than many high-tech solutions other students employed. "What about the pack hunters?" asked Professor Krell, a security specialist. "Those creatures are rated Class 3 hazards specifically because they have injured students in past examinations. Cooper drove them away by throwing rocks and making aggressive vocalizations," Professor Zithera said. "The hunters perceived him as a threat rather than prey and chose to disengage. His threat display was instinctive and highly effective." Chancellor Voss, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Tell them about the megafauna incident." Professor Zithera pulled up the relevant footage. The faculty watched as Ryan calmly assessed the creature, predicted its behavior, and organized an evacuation of the camps from its feeding territory. They saw the massive herbivore enter the clearing and feed peacefully while students watched from a safe distance. "He prevented what could have been our first serious injury in 3 years, Professor Zithera said. "And he did it by understanding animal behavior better than our own specialists. He treated a Class 3 hazard as if it were a minor inconvenience." Professor Rell, who taught advanced physics, raised a tentacle. "I am confused about something. If this human found the examination so easy, does that mean he did not meet the challenge requirement? Should we increase the difficulty for him specifically?" Chancellor Voss answered before Professor Zithera could respond. "That is the wrong question, Professor Rell. The correct question is whether our examination accurately measures survival competence for all species, or whether it is calibrated only for species from low-risk homeworlds." The room was quiet for a moment as the faculty considered this. "Earth is a Class 12 death world," Chancellor Voss continued. "We designed this examination to challenge species from Class 4 through Class 8 worlds. To Cooper, our dangerous environment was probably easier than a normal outdoor experience on his own planet. That does not make him less qualified. It makes him exceptionally qualified." "So what are you proposing, Chancellor?" Professor Venn asked. "I am proposing we accept reality," Chancellor Voss said. "Death world species have survival advantages that our current curriculum does not account for." Cooper demonstrated expert-level competence in every measured category. He also demonstrated leadership by teaching other students practical skills that likely saved lives. I recommend he receive the highest marks in this course's history. Furthermore, I recommend we offer him a position as guest instructor to teach practical survival techniques to future classes. Professor Zithera's mandibles clicked in agreement. "I support this recommendation. Additionally, I propose we update the course description to acknowledge that difficulty is relative to species origin. Students from death worlds should be informed that they may find the content less challenging than species from safer environments." The faculty voted. The decision was unanimous. 3 days later, final grades were posted. Ryan checked his data pad and saw the notification. "Advanced Survival Studies. Superior Achievement, highest marks recorded." Below that was another message requesting his presence in Chancellor Voss's office. Ryan arrived at the appointed time and found not only Chancellor Voss but also Professor Zithera waiting for him. They gestured for him to sit. "Human Cooper," Chancellor Voss began, "your performance in the survival examination was exceptional. The faculty has unanimously agreed that you demonstrated the highest level of competence we have ever recorded in this course." "Thank you, sir," Ryan said. "We would like to offer you a position," Professor Zithera added. "Guest instructor for practical survival techniques. The position would involve teaching 1 course per semester, sharing the skills and knowledge that allowed you to excel where others struggled. You would work alongside regular faculty and receive appropriate compensation." Ryan was genuinely surprised. "You want me to teach other students?" "We do," Chancellor Voss confirmed. "Your classmates have already submitted requests to learn from you. Word has spread throughout the academy about the human who survived with only a knife and taught others how to thrive instead of merely endure. This is valuable knowledge, Cooper. Knowledge that could save lives in real emergency situations." Ryan thought about it for a moment. He remembered Ten's terrified chirping on the first night, and how the avian student had grown more confident after learning basic skills. He remembered Zora's initial mockery turning to respect. He remembered students gathering around his fire, eager to learn, their fear replaced by curiosity. "I would be honored to teach," Ryan said. "Excellent," Chancellor Voss said, entering something into his data pad. "We will arrange the details. Classes will begin next semester. Professor Zithera will work with you on curriculum development." As Ryan stood to leave, Professor Zithera stopped him. "Cooper, I must ask you something that has been troubling me. During the examination, were you ever actually in danger? At any point did you feel your life was threatened? Ryan considered the question honestly. The first night was cold, he said finally. If I had not built the fire quickly enough, hypothermia could have been a problem. That was probably the most dangerous moment. Professor Zithera's mandibles clicked, and what Ryan had learned was exasperation mixed with amusement. So the greatest threat you faced was being slightly cold. Yes, Professor, Ryan said with a small smile. Everything else was manageable. After he left, Professor Zithera turned to Chancellor Voss. I have updated the course description as we discussed. Would you like to review it? Chancellor Voss nodded, and she displayed the text on the holographic screen. Advanced Survival Studies. This course prepares students for emergency survival situations on hostile planets and in dangerous environments. Students will face Class 3 biological hazards, environmental challenges, and resource scarcity in a controlled but realistic setting. Successful completion requires demonstrating competence in threat assessment, resource management, and psychological stability under stress. Note: course difficulty is rated for species from non-Deathworld origins. Students from Class 10 or higher Deathworlds may find the content underwhelming and are encouraged to discuss additional challenges with the instructor. Chancellor Voss read it and nodded approval. Perfect. It is honest without being discouraging. 4 months later, Ryan stood in front of a lecture hall packed with over 100 students from dozens of different species. It was the largest enrollment for an elective course in the Academy's recent history. 10 sat in the front row, having signed up immediately when registration opened. Zora was there too, her scales showing patterns of eager anticipation. Welcome to Practical Survival Techniques, Ryan began, his voice calm and confident. This course will teach you skills that have been used on Earth for thousands of years. Skills that allowed humans to survive and thrive in one of the galaxy's harshest environments. You will learn to create fire without tools, find and purify water, build shelter from natural materials, identify food sources, understand animal behavior, and most importantly, how to stay calm when everything seems dangerous. He paused and looked around the room. These skills saved my ancestors' lives for countless generations. They saved my life during the survival examination. And they might save your lives someday. Let us begin. On the holographic display behind him, images of Earth appeared. Forests, deserts, mountains, oceans. Beautiful and deadly in equal measure. The students leaned forward, ready to learn from someone who had proven that survival was not about having the best equipment or the strongest body. It was about having the right knowledge, the right mindset, and the willingness to adapt. Ryan picked up a piece of wood and a simple knife, the same knife he had used during the examination. First lesson, he said. Fire. The most important tool humans ever mastered. Let me show you how it works. The students watched intently as the human began to teach them secrets of survival that were ancient before their civilizations had even discovered fire themselves. And in that moment, the gap between Deathworld and Garden World seemed a little smaller, because knowledge could be shared and understanding could be taught. On Earth, humans had learned to survive by respecting danger without fearing it. Now, in a lecture hall light years from that violent, beautiful planet, that same lesson was being passed on to new students who would carry it to the stars.